The jungle of Velthera was alive with the sounds of strange creatures. Towering trees with dark blue leaves stretched toward the sky, their roots twisting through thick, misty ground. The air smelled of damp earth and something metallic, like the scent of a coming storm. The lone man moved carefully through the undergrowth, his steps quiet, his breath controlled. Damon Rains knew he was being hunted. His ship had crashed only a day ago, but he had quickly realized that this planet was no ordinary wilderness. Something lurked here, watching, waiting. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he pressed his back against a thick tree trunk, scanning the shadows. Then, a sharp clicking sound echoed in the distance. His muscles tensed. It was her again. She had been following him for hours, silent, patient, skilled. She was faster than him, stronger than him, and had the advantage of knowing this land. But Damon had one thing she didn't have. He was human. And humans, they never gave up. On a high cliff above the jungle, Vicus observed her prey. Her piercing silver eyes tracked his every move. Damon Rains was unlike anything she had hunted before. Most creatures on this planet ran in panic when hunted by the XRK, her people. But this human, he didn't panic. He had already survived longer than expected. He had built crude traps, covered his tracks, and even doubled back to check if she was watching. Vicus's mandibles twitched in curiosity. This wasn't supposed to be difficult. Her kind had conquered dozens of worlds, and no species had ever truly challenged them. So why did this human refuse to behave like prey? Her grip tightened on her spear. If he wanted to play this game, she would show him what it meant to be the hunted. With a silent leap, she disappeared into the trees. Damon's heartbeat slowed as he crouched behind a boulder. He needed to think. He had no weapons, at least, not in the traditional sense. His ship was a burning wreck miles away, and any supplies he had were either destroyed or stolen by the creatures of this jungle. All he had were his wits. He pulled a sharp piece of metal from his boot, salvaged from his ship's hull. It wasn't much, but it was something. Something to fight back. A rustling sound came from above. Damon didn't look up. He rolled away just in time. A dark figure landed where he had crouched just seconds before. She was tall, covered in sleek, dark armor that almost blended into the night. Her body was built for speed, her claws glinting in the dim light. The huntress was alien, but unmistakably dangerous. Vicus turned her head, watching him with something almost amused in her expression. "You run well, human," she said, her voice smooth, yet edged with something predatory. "But you can't run forever." Damon smirked. "I wasn't running. I was luring you in." Before she could react, he kicked up dirt into her face and sprinted into the trees. She hissed in frustration, but quickly followed. The chase through the jungle was brutal. Damon moved fast, dodging between thick vines and fallen logs. Vicus was right behind him, her agility almost inhuman. But she didn't realize he was leading her somewhere. They burst into a clearing. Damon skidded to a stop just before the ground collapsed beneath him. Vicus, moving too fast to stop, stepped forward, and the ground crumbled. With a sharp cry, she fell into a hidden pit. Damon stepped forward, breathing heavily. He had spent the last 2 hours digging that pit exactly for this moment. Vicus landed on her feet, growling as she looked up. The walls of the pit were too smooth to climb, and for the first time, she was the one who was trapped. Damon grinned down at her. "I thought you said I couldn't run forever." Vicus stared at him. Then, to his shock, she started laughing, a deep, amused sound. "Impressive," she admitted. "You truly are different from the other species I'd hunted." Damon didn't lower his guard. "You're not the first thing that's tried to kill me, and you won't be the last." Vicus tilted her head, her silver eyes gleaming. "Perhaps. But tell me, human, what will you do now?" Damon's grin faded slightly. He had trapped her, yes, but he knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Above them, the sky rumbled with an approaching storm. The hunt was far from finished. Vicus stood at the bottom of the pit, her silver eyes locked onto Damon. Her sharp claws scraped against the smooth stone walls as she tested them. They were too slick to climb, at least not without proper footing. She had fallen for the human's trap, a mistake she had never made before. Damon stood above her, gripping his makeshift blade. The wind rustled through the jungle, carrying the distant growls of nocturnal creatures. The storm clouds above had thickened, casting a heavy darkness over the land. He had the upper hand now, but he knew it wouldn't last. Vicus smirked, her mandibles twitching slightly. "You are full of surprises, human." Damon kept his stance firm. "I'm just getting started." She crouched, her muscles tensing. For a moment, he thought she might leap straight up, but instead she studied him. It was a hunter's gaze, evaluating the strength of her prey. "You could kill me now," Vicus said, tilting her head. "Yet you hesitate." Damon frowned. It was true. He had her trapped, but he wasn't a killer. At least, not like her. He had fought to survive many times before, but he had never hunted for sport. "I'm not like you," he said simply. Vicus chuckled. "No, you are not." Then, without warning, she moved. Vicus leaped at the wall, her claws digging in just enough to slow her descent as she kicked off with unnatural strength. She launched herself upward, twisting in midair. Damon barely had time to react before she grabbed the edge of the pit, her claws sinking into the dirt. "Damn it!" He took a step back, but she was already pulling herself out. She landed lightly, standing just a few feet away. Damon raised his weapon, but she didn't attack. Instead, she rolled her shoulders, stretching as if shaking off the fall. The jungle was silent. The only sound was the distant rumbling of thunder. "You should run," she said, her voice smooth and confident again. "Now that I know your tricks, they won't work a second time." Damon exhaled slowly, his mind racing. She was right. If he tried to trap her again, she would be ready. He had used his best advantage, and now she was prepared for it. But he wasn't done yet. "You've been hunting me for hours," he said. "Tell me something. Why am I still alive?" Vicus paused. Her silver eyes studied him for a moment. "Because you are different." Damon raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" She stepped closer, her movements slow, deliberate. "Every species we hunt follows a pattern. They run in fear. They make the same mistakes. But you fight back. You learn." Damon smirked. "That's what humans do." Vicus tilted her head. "Perhaps that is why my people speak of your kind with caution. You are weak compared to many species, yet somehow you survive." The wind picked up, sending leaves swirling between them. Damon took a step forward. "So why are we still talking?" Vicus crossed her arms. "Because I am no longer certain you are prey." Damon blinked. "That was unexpected. Is that your way of saying I won?" She laughed. "Not yet, human. But I am considering whether you are worth hunting." Damon frowned. "And if I'm not?" Vicus's smirk deepened. "Then we will see what else you are good for." A flash of lightning split the sky, and the first drops of rain began to fall. The storm was here. Damon knew he couldn't afford to stay in the open. The jungle's predators would awaken, and the rain would make the terrain even more dangerous. "I need shelter," he muttered, glancing around. Vicus stretched her arms lazily. "There is a cave nearby. You will not last the night without cover." Damon narrowed his eyes. "And you're just going to tell me where it is?" She shrugged. "You are more interesting alive than dead." Damon exhaled. He had no reason to trust her, but at the same time, she had no reason to lie. "Fine," he said. "Lead the way." Vicus gave him one last amused glance before turning and walking into the jungle. Damon followed, gripping his blade tightly. He wasn't sure if he had just escaped death or walked right into a bigger trap. One thing was certain, this hunt was far from over. The rain poured heavily as Damon followed Vicus through the dense jungle. Thick vines draped over ancient trees, their leaves glistening with water. The ground had turned soft, making every step a challenge. Damon's instincts screamed at him to stay alert. He had just spent hours trying to outsmart this alien huntress, and now he was following her. It felt like walking straight into a trap. Vicus, on the other hand, moved effortlessly, her tall form blending with the shadows of the jungle. Despite the storm, she walked with confidence, showing no concern for the dangers that lurked around them. "How much farther?" Damon asked, keeping his tone neutral. Vicus glanced over her shoulder, her silver eyes gleaming even in the darkness. "Not far, human, unless you are too tired to keep up." Damon smirked. "I've been surviving on this planet longer than I should have. I'll be fine." She let out an amused huff and turned forward again. "We will see." Minutes later, they reached a rocky cliffside, half hidden by thick foliage. A natural cave entrance yawned before them, dark and silent. Vicus stepped inside first, her movements cautious. Damon hesitated for just a second before following. The cave was large, with smooth walls and a high ceiling. The air inside was cool, a relief from the damp jungle outside. Water dripped from above, echoing softly in the darkness. Damon took a quick look around. No obvious threats, yet, but something about this place made his skin prickle. Vicus settled near the entrance, sitting on a rock. "We wait here until the storm passes." Damon frowned. "Just like that. No more hunting." She smirked. "For now." Damon exhaled and found a dry spot to sit. He wasn't about to let his guard down, but he needed to rest. His body was exhausted from running, fighting, and thinking of ways to stay alive. For a while, neither of them spoke. The storm howled outside, rain hammering against the rocks. Then, Vicus broke the silence. "Tell me something, human." Damon glanced at her. "What?" She tilted her head slightly. "Why do you fight so hard?" Damon hesitated. It was a simple question, yet loaded with meaning. "Because I have to," he said finally. "Humans don't have claws. We don't have thick skin or natural armor. We weren't built to fight." Vicus raised an eyebrow. "And yet you do." Damon nodded. "Because if we didn't, we wouldn't exist." Vicus studied him for a moment before chuckling softly. "I think I am starting to understand why my people speak of your kind with caution." Damon leaned back against the wall. "Yeah, and what do they say?" She met his gaze, her silver eyes gleaming. "That humans are weak, fragile, yet, somehow, unstoppable." Damon chuckled, not sure if that's an insult or a compliment. Vicus smirked. "Perhaps both." A sudden snap from outside the cave made both of them go still. Damon froze, his senses sharpening. He knew that sound. It wasn't just the wind or the storm. Something was out there. Vicus rose to her feet, her posture shifting into a defensive stance. She wasn't relaxed anymore. Damon slowly reached for his makeshift blade. "Tell me that was just the wind." Vicus didn't answer. Instead, she moved towards the entrance and peered out into the darkness. The rain had lessened, but the jungle beyond was too quiet. Damon's grip tightened. He had spent enough time in dangerous places to know what silence meant. Predators were near. Vicus took a slow breath. "We are not alone." Damon cursed under his breath. "Let me guess, something worse than you." She didn't smile this time. "Much worse." A low, guttural growl echoed through the jungle. It was deep, vibrating through the air like distant thunder. Damon's stomach dropped. That didn't sound friendly. Vicus turned back to him. "Stay close. If we are lucky, it has not caught our scent yet." Damon didn't like the word "if." A shadow moved outside the cave, massive and unnatural. Then a second growl. Closer. Damon exhaled sharply. "Yeah, I don't think we're lucky." Vicus's expression darkened. "Run." Damon gave her a lopsided grin. Now you're speaking my language. And then the beast charged. The beast lunged into the cave. Damon barely had time to react before Vicus shoved him aside, her body moving with practiced speed. The creature's massive claws slashed through the air, missing them by inches. A deep guttural growl filled the cave, sending vibrations through the stone walls. Damon rolled to his feet, heart pounding. He had seen many dangerous predators before, but this was something else. The creature was huge, its dark, armored body blending into the shadows, its glowing yellow eyes locked onto them, filled with hunger. Vicus hissed, her stance shifting into one of pure aggression. "Stay behind me, human." Damon scoffed, "Not a chance." The beast roared and charged. Vicus dodged left, Damon rolled right. The creature's massive claws struck the ground where they had just been, sending dust and stone flying. Damon scrambled back, gripping his makeshift blade. "Tell me you have a plan." Vicus leaped onto a nearby rock, eyes fixed on the beast. "Kill it before it kills us." "Brilliant," Damon muttered. The beast swung its tail, nearly knocking Vicus off her perch. She landed gracefully, claws digging into the stone. Damon wasn't as lucky. The tail slammed into him, sending him flying into the cave wall. Pain exploded in his back as he hit the rock. His vision blurred, but he forced himself to move. He couldn't afford to stay down. Not now. Vicus lunged at the beast, her claws slicing across its thick hide. The creature shrieked, but the wounds were shallow. It was too well armored. Damon wiped the blood from his lip. His blade was useless against something that big. He needed a different approach. His eyes darted around the cave, looking for anything useful. Then he saw it. A stalactite hanging from the ceiling. Sharp. Heavy. A plan formed in his mind. It was risky, but he didn't have any better options. "Vicus," he shouted. She twisted, barely avoiding another claw swipe. "What?" "Get it under the rock spikes." She glanced up, saw the sharp formations hanging from the ceiling, and grinned. "Understood." She rushed forward, dodging past the beast's swipes. It lunged at her, jaws snapping. But she was faster. She leaped, spinning in midair, and slashed its eyes. The beast howled, staggering backward, right under the largest stalactite. Damon moved. Ignoring the pain in his ribs, he grabbed a loose stone and hurled it at the stalactite's base. Crack. The heavy rock shook but didn't fall. Not enough. Damon clenched his teeth. One more. He grabbed another rock, threw it with all his strength. Crack. The stalactite broke loose. With a deafening crash, it plummeted down and impaled the beast through its back. The creature let out a final, echoing shriek before collapsing onto the cave floor. Silence followed. Damon stood there, breathing heavily. His arms trembled from exhaustion, his body sore. Vicus stepped beside him, surveying the fallen beast. "Clever," she admitted. Damon exhaled. "Yeah, let's never do that again." She chuckled. "Agreed." They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the rain outside. The storm was still strong, but the real danger had passed. Vicus turned to him, her silver eyes unreadable. "You fight well for a human." Damon smirked. "And you're not bad for a whatever you are." Vicus raised an eyebrow. "HFY." Damon nodded. "Right. That." For the first time since they had met, the tension between them shifted. They were still enemies, but something had changed. They had fought together and survived. Vicus crossed her arms. "I could have killed you many times, human." Damon leaned against the rock, smirking. "Funny. I was thinking the same thing." She studied him for a moment, then smiled. "Perhaps I was wrong about you." Damon's expression softened. "Maybe I was wrong about you too." The storm raged on, but inside the cave, two former enemies sat in silence, both realizing something neither had expected. The hunt was over, but something else was beginning. The storm outside had begun to settle. The steady drumming of rain against the rocks softened, and the distant rumble of thunder faded into the night. Inside the cave, Damon and Vicus sat near the fading glow of a small fire they had managed to start. The flickering flames cast long shadows against the stone walls. Damon leaned back, stretching his sore muscles. His ribs still ached from the fight, and his arms felt heavy, but he was alive. Vicus sat across from him, watching the flames with an expression Damon couldn't quite read. "You keep staring at me like that, and I might start thinking you actually like me," Damon said with a smirk. Vicus let out an amused huff. "I am only wondering how you have survived this long." Damon raised an eyebrow. "Pure stubbornness." She chuckled. "That, I believe." A moment of silence passed between them. The tension that had once existed, the deadly game of hunter and prey, was gone now. Damon's gaze drifted toward the lifeless body of the massive beast they had killed. Its dark hide was still glistening from the rain, its massive claws half buried in the dirt. Even in death, it looked dangerous. "So," Damon began, "what exactly was that thing?" Vicus glanced at the beast before answering. "A Vorkath, one of the deadliest creatures on this planet." Damon let out a slow breath. "Fantastic. Just what I needed after getting hunted by you all day." Vicus smirked. "You should be honored. Few have faced one and lived." Damon scoffed. "Yeah, I'll be sure to put that on my resume." Vicus tilted her head. "What is a resume?" Damon blinked, then chuckled. "Never mind." For the first time since meeting her, he allowed himself to relax. The hunt was over, at least for now, but something still nagged at the back of his mind. Vicus had every chance to kill him, every opportunity to end the hunt, but she hadn't. And that meant something. Damon turned serious. "All right, Vicus, I need to know, why did you stop hunting me?" Vicus didn't answer immediately. She seemed to consider his question, as if she was deciding whether or not to tell him the truth. Finally, she met his gaze. "Because I was not certain anymore." Damon frowned. "Certain about what?" She exhaled, her silver eyes gleaming in the dim firelight. "My people, the HFY, have hunted for generations. It is not just for sport, it is who we are. To prove our strength, we must conquer our prey." Damon remained quiet, letting her continue. "At first, I believed you were just another challenge, a weak species that could be easily outmatched." She paused. "But you did not run like prey. You did not surrender like prey. You fought back. You adapted." Damon tilted his head. "And that changed things for you?" Vicus nodded. "Yes. I realized something my people refused to accept." She leaned forward slightly, her voice lower now. "Humans are dangerous, not because of your weapons or numbers, but because you do not stop." Damon chuckled dryly. "Yeah, we have a habit of that." Vicus studied him for a long moment before she spoke again. "I do not think of you as prey anymore, Damon Rains." Damon held her gaze. He believed her. And yet, something about her words sent a chill through him. If she, an elite huntress, had started to question the ways of her people, what would happen if the rest of her kind found out? Damon sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "So what happens now?" Vicus glanced toward the cave entrance, where the storm had fully passed. "That depends." Damon narrowed his eyes. "On what?" She met his gaze once more. "On whether you wish to leave this planet alive." A heavy silence followed. Damon straightened. "That sounds like a warning." Vicus nodded. "It is." She stood, stretching her limbs. "The HFY never leave a hunt unfinished. If my people learn that I spared you, they will not be pleased." Damon sighed. "Great, so now I have an entire race of alien hunters after me." Vicus smirked. "Perhaps, but I may have a way to change that." Damon raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." She stepped closer, her silver eyes sharp. "You fought well today. If you can prove yourself once more, to my people, They may see you as more than just a human. Damon frowned. And how exactly do I prove myself? Vicus grinned. By surviving their next test. Damon groaned. Why do I feel like this is going to be worse than being hunted? Vicus chuckled. Because it will be. Damon ran a hand down his face. Fantastic. Despite the situation, he couldn't help but smile. The hunt was over. But the real challenge had just begun. The storm had passed, leaving behind a humid stillness in the air. Outside the cave, the jungle of Velthera had come alive again. Strange creatures chirped and rustled in the thick undergrowth, sensing the return of calm. But inside the cave, the real storm was just beginning. Damon crossed his arms, watching Vicus carefully. All right, let me get this straight. You spared me, but now I have to prove myself to your people. And if I don't, they'll hunt me down. Vicus nodded. Yes. Damon sighed, shaking his head. You aliens sure know how to make things complicated. Vicus smirked. We do not see it that way. Strength must be proven. The hunt is not just about survival. It is about earning one's place. Damon frowned. And what if I'm not interested in earning a place among a bunch of alien hunters? Vicus's silver eyes darkened slightly. Then they will not stop until you are dead. Damon exhaled slowly. That wasn't the answer he was hoping for. He had faced dangerous situations before, but this was on a different level. He wasn't just running for his life anymore. He was part of something bigger. And worst of all, he had no choice but to play along. He ran a hand through his hair. All right, fine. What's the plan? Vicus turned toward the cave entrance, her posture straight and confident. There is only one way to make them see you differently. Damon raised an eyebrow. And that is. She looked over her shoulder, a glint of amusement in her eyes. You must hunt. Damon blinked. Excuse me. Vicus nodded. If you can track and kill a worthy target, my people will recognize you as something greater than prey. Damon scoffed. Right. So all I have to do is hunt some dangerous alien monster, and then the Exarchide will stop trying to kill me. Vicus grinned. Yes. Simple, is it not? Damon let out a dry laugh. Oh yeah. Simple. Just one little problem. He gestured to himself. I don't have claws, or fangs, or super speed. I barely have a weapon. Vicus tilted her head. Then you must use what you do have. Damon sighed. He didn't like this plan, but what other choice did he have? The hunt begins. The jungle stretched before them, vast and unforgiving. The ground was damp from the rain, making it harder to move without leaving tracks. Damon followed Vicus through the undergrowth, his senses on high alert. He didn't know what they were hunting, but if it was anything like the Vorkath from before, he was in for a rough time. Vicus suddenly halted, raising a hand. Damon stopped instantly, his body tensing. What is it? He whispered. Vicus scanned the area, then gestured toward a clearing ahead. Tracks. Damon squinted. The ground looked disturbed, deep claw marks cutting through the mud. Whatever had made those prints was big. Vicus crouched, running her fingers over the markings. It passed through here recently. Damon swallowed. Great. And what exactly are we tracking? Vicus stood, her expression serious. A shadow maw. Damon stared at her. That sounds bad. Vicus smirked. It is. Damon sighed. Of course it is. The shadow maw. They moved carefully, following the tracks deeper into the jungle. The air was thick with tension, and Damon could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching them from the darkness. Then a low rumble echoed through the trees. Vicus stopped, her claws flexing. It is close. Damon gripped his makeshift blade tighter. Tell me something. How do we kill it? Vicus smirked. We do not fight it directly. We make it come to us. Damon frowned. And how do we do that? She pointed to a massive tree with thick, twisting roots. We set a trap. Damon glanced at the area. thinking quickly. He didn't have weapons strong enough to take down a beast like this. But what he did have was his mind. "All right," he muttered. "Let's get to work." The trap is set. Minutes later, they had prepared the battlefield. Damon had helped Vicus set up a snare using vines and sharp stones, hidden beneath the undergrowth. If they could lure the creature into the right spot, they might just have a chance. Then the growl came again. Louder, closer. Damon felt his heartbeat pick up. Time to see if this works. Vicus let out a low clicking sound, something inhuman. The jungle went still. Then, movement. The trees shook, and a massive black form emerged from the shadows. Its yellow eyes gleamed in the darkness, its elongated jaw lined with rows of jagged teeth. Damon exhaled. Yep, that's terrifying. The shadow maw let out a deep, echoing growl. Vicus grinned. Let the hunt begin. The shadow maw growled low, its massive form shifting in the shadows of the jungle. Its yellow eyes glowed like lanterns in the dark, fixed on Damon and Vicus. Damon's fingers tightened around his makeshift blade. It felt useless against something this big. He wasn't built for fighting monsters, but he was built for surviving them. Vicus crouched low, her silver eyes locked on the beast. "It has caught our scent," she whispered. "It will strike soon." Damon exhaled slowly. "Then we better make sure it strikes where we want." The trap was set. If they could lure the creature into position, the sharpened vines and stones they had hidden in the ground would do the rest. The only problem, they had to make it chase them first. Vicus flicked her wrist, a small blade appearing in her hand. "We go on my signal." Damon swallowed. "And what's the signal?" Vicus lunged. The shadow maw roared, swiping at her with claws the size of daggers. Vicus dodged, lightning fast, slashing across its thick hide. Sparks flew as her blade scraped against its armored skin. Damon didn't wait. He ran. He darted past the beast, yelling to draw its attention. "Hey, ugly. Over here." The creature's head snapped toward him, its growl deepening. It didn't like being taunted. Good. That was exactly what Damon wanted. The shadow maw charged, crushing the jungle floor beneath its weight. Damon ran straight for the trap. The deadly chase. The jungle blurred around him. The beast was right behind him, crashing through trees like they were twigs. Damon's breath was ragged. His legs burned. But he couldn't stop now. Just a little farther. The ground shook as the creature closed in. He could feel its breath hot on his back. One swipe from its claws, and he would be finished. "Now," Vicus shouted. Damon dove forward, hitting the dirt just as the shadow maw lunged. Its massive body slammed down, right onto the hidden pit. The ground collapsed beneath it, sending it crashing into the jagged spikes and stones below. A deafening roar tore through the jungle. The beast thrashed, trying to claw its way free, but it was trapped. Vicus landed beside Damon, her breath steady. It worked. Damon rolled onto his back, panting. "Remind me never to do that again." Vicus smirked. No promises. The final strike. The shadow maw wasn't dead yet. It snarled, thrashing against the pit walls, its claws scraping at the edges. If it got out, Damon didn't want to think about that. Vicus stood over the pit, watching the beast struggle. "It is strong." Damon wiped the sweat from his brow. "Yeah, too strong." Vicus turned to him. "Then we end this. Together." Damon hesitated. "Together." She nodded. "You have earned the right." For a moment, Damon said nothing. The XRK didn't see humans as equals. They saw them as prey. Yet here was Vicus, offering him a place beside her. He clenched his jaw. If he was going to prove himself, this was the moment. He stood. "All right. Let's finish this." Vicus pulled 2 blades from her armor and handed one to him. "Aim for the throat." Damon took the weapon, gripping it tightly. "Got it." They moved as one. Vicus leaped first, landing on the creature's back, her claws digging into its hide. She slashed, cutting deep into its weak spots. The shadow maw howled in rage, but it was weakened. Damon saw his chance. He jumped forward, landing on a rock just above the beast's head. He raised the blade and drove it down. The weapon pierced through the creature's throat, deep into its core. The shadow maw let out one final, shuddering breath before it collapsed. Silence fell over the jungle. It was over. Recognition. Damon pulled his blade free, his hands trembling. He had done it. Vicus stepped beside him, her silver eyes gleaming with approval. You fought well. Damon let out a weak chuckle. Yeah, not bad for a human, huh? Vicus grinned. Not bad at all. For the first time since they had met, there was no hunt, no predator, no prey, just two warriors standing side by side. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. This changes things. Damon raised an eyebrow. How so? Vicus exhaled. My people, they will see this. They will know what you did. Damon crossed his arms. And what will they think? Vicus smirked. That humans are more than just prey. Damon chuckled. Took them long enough. Vicus nodded. Come, Damon Rains. We have much to discuss. Damon glanced at the dead beast one last time before following Vicus into the jungle. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about what came next. And for the first time, he wasn't just a hunted human. He was something more.